In the heart of Alabama, hidden among the dense pine forests and rolling hills, lies a secret that few dare to speak of. Just outside the small town of Redstone, there is an unmarked facility known only to a select few within the highest echelons of the government and military. This facility, officially designated as a biological research center, is rumored to be the site of some of the most controversial and ethically questionable experiments in modern history: human cloning. The first whispers of these experiments began to surface in the early 1990s, when a series of unexplained disappearances and strange sightings plagued the area. Locals spoke of unmarked black vans, strange lights in the sky, and heavily guarded convoys moving through the night. Those who got too curious often found themselves facing intense scrutiny or outright threats. The small, close-knit community of Redstone was living in a shadow, one that grew darker with each passing year. Dr. Evelyn Carter, a former researcher at the facility, was one of the few who dared to break the silence. After a decade of working in the high-security labs, she became increasingly disturbed by what she saw. According to Dr. Carter, the facility was not just a research center, but a front for a much larger and more sinister operation: the creation and experimentation of human clones. Her journey into the facility began with an innocuous enough premise: biomedical research aimed at understanding human genetics and improving health outcomes. But as she delved deeper into her work, she began to notice anomalies: strange directives, classified projects, and a level of secrecy that went far beyond standard protocol. The breaking point came when she was assigned to a top-secret project known as Project Genesis. Project Genesis, as Dr. Carter later revealed, was an ambitious and morally dubious program aimed at creating and studying human clones. The goal was to unlock the secrets of human genetics, with the ultimate aim of perfecting the cloning process for purposes that ranged from medical advancements to military applications. The project operated under the highest levels of secrecy, with participants sworn to absolute silence under threat of severe repercussions. Dr. Carter described the facility as a maze of underground laboratories, each dedicated to different aspects of the cloning process. The research involved not just the creation of clones, but their rapid aging, genetic manipulation, and the implantation of memories and skills. The clones were not seen as individuals, but as test subjects, disposable and replaceable. The ethical implications of such work weighed heavily on Dr. Carter. The clones, she realized, were sentient beings, capable of thought and emotion, yet they were treated as mere objects, subjected to horrific experiments and denied any semblance of humanity. The final straw came when she witnessed a failed experiment: an entire batch of clones malformed and suffering, discarded like trash. Unable to reconcile her conscience with the work being done, Dr. Carter decided to gather evidence and blow the whistle. She managed to smuggle out documents, photographs, and video recordings that detailed the extent of the experiments. But as she prepared to go public, she found herself targeted by a campaign of intimidation and harassment. Her home was broken into, her phone was tapped, and she was followed wherever she went. Realizing the danger she was in, Dr. Carter went into hiding, reaching out to trusted journalists and human rights organizations to share her story. Dr. Evelyn Carter's revelations sent shockwaves through the scientific community and beyond. The documents she provided painted a chilling picture of the lengths to which the government and military were willing to go in their quest for genetic superiority. The cloning experiments at the Redstone facility were far more advanced and morally reprehensible than anyone had imagined. One of the most disturbing aspects of the program was the use of unwilling human subjects. According to Dr. Carter, many of the clones were created using the DNA of individuals who had been abducted or otherwise coerced into participating. These individuals, often from marginalized communities, were chosen for their genetic traits and then effectively erased from existence, their identities subsumed by their cloned counterparts. The experiments were conducted under the guise of legitimate research. Officially, the facility's work was aimed at curing genetic diseases and extending human lifespan. But the reality, as Dr. Carter's evidence showed, was far more sinister. The clones were subjected to rapid aging protocols to test the limits of human longevity, and their genetic material was manipulated in ways that bordered on the grotesque. The goal was to create a new breed of superhumans, individuals with enhanced physical and mental capabilities, designed for specific roles within military and governmental frameworks. Dr. Carter's disclosures also revealed the involvement of high-ranking officials and private contractors. The program was funded through black budgets, with no oversight from Congress or the public. Companies with ties to the defense and pharmaceutical industries provided the technology and expertise needed to carry out the experiments, creating a web of complicity that extended far beyond the walls of the Redstone facility. As Dr. Carter's story gained traction, other whistleblowers began to emerge. Former security personnel, researchers, and even test subjects came forward, each adding pieces to the puzzle. They spoke of a sprawling underground complex, with levels dedicated to different stages of the cloning process. The deeper one went, the more disturbing the experiments became. Clones were kept in cages, subjected to constant surveillance and brutal tests. Those who failed to meet the desired criteria were terminated without hesitation. The response from the government was swift and aggressive. Official channels dismissed Dr. Carter's claims as baseless, labeling her a disgruntled employee with a vendetta. The media was flooded with counter-narratives, painting her as unstable and unreliable. But the evidence was too compelling to ignore, and independent journalists and human rights organizations took up the cause, demanding transparency and accountability. The Redstone facility, under intense scrutiny, tightened its security measures. Access to the site was restricted even further, and attempts to investigate were met with fierce resistance. However, the revelations had already ignited a firestorm of public outrage. Protests erupted across the country, with calls for a full investigation into the government's secret cloning programs. Advocacy groups filed lawsuits, seeking the release of documents and the closure of the facility. The pressure from the public and independent investigators began to crack the facade of secrecy surrounding the Redstone facility. Leaked documents and testimonies continued to surface, painting an ever clearer picture of the scale and scope of the cloning experiments. Among the most shocking revelations was the existence of a covert operation known as Operation Doppelganger, which aimed to create exact replicas of key political figures and military leaders. These clones were intended to serve as perfect stand-ins, able to step in seamlessly if the originals were incapacitated or compromised. The implications of such a program were staggering, suggesting a level of control and manipulation that went far beyond simple scientific curiosity. The existence of these doppelgangers raised questions about the authenticity of those in power and the extent to which they might be influenced or controlled by unseen forces. As more information came to light, it became clear that the Redstone facility was just one piece of a much larger puzzle. Similar facilities were rumored to exist in other states, each conducting their own variations of the cloning experiments. The network of secret labs and research centers stretched across the country, hidden in plain sight yet operating beyond the reach of conventional oversight. The unraveling of this conspiracy brought together a diverse coalition of activists, scientists, and concerned citizens. Grassroots movements sprang up, demanding an end to the unethical experimentation and greater transparency from the government. Whistleblowers who had previously remained silent began to speak out, emboldened by the growing public support and the knowledge that they were not alone in their experiences. One particularly impactful testimony came from Mark Daniels, a former security contractor at the Redstone facility. Daniels provided detailed accounts of the security measures in place, describing a level of sophistication and paranoia that bordered on the dystopian. Biometric scanners, retinal recognition systems, and constant surveillance were standard, creating an environment where dissent was not just discouraged but actively punished. Daniels also spoke of witnessing firsthand the brutal treatment of the clones. He described a culture of dehumanization, where the clones were referred to by numbers rather than names and subjected to a regimen of physical and psychological torture. The goal, he explained, was to break their will and ensure complete obedience, turning them into perfect instruments of the state. The growing body of evidence and the sheer number of corroborating testimonies made it increasingly difficult for the government to maintain its stance of denial. Calls for an independent investigation grew louder, with prominent figures from both the political and scientific communities joining the chorus. The issue reached a tipping point when a coalition of lawmakers introduced a bill demanding the declassification of all documents related to human cloning and the immediate cessation of any ongoing experiments. The introduction of the bill marked a turning point in the struggle for truth and accountability. The proposed legislation called for a comprehensive investigation into the activities at the Redstone facility and any other similar installations across the country. It also sought to establish strict ethical guidelines for genetic research, ensuring that the abuses uncovered would never be repeated. The debate over the bill was intense, with strong opposition from those with vested interests in the continuation of the cloning programs. lobbyists representing defense contractors and pharmaceutical companies mounted a concerted effort to derail the legislation, arguing that the research was vital for national security and medical advancement. However, the weight of public opinion and the mounting evidence of ethical violations proved to be insurmountable obstacles. In a historic vote, the bill passed with overwhelming support, mandating the creation of an independent commission to investigate the allegations. The commission, composed of experts from various fields, was given unprecedented access to classified documents and facilities. Their mandate was clear: to uncover the full extent of the cloning experiments, hold those responsible accountable, and recommend measures to prevent future abuses. The commission's findings were damning. They confirmed the existence of extensive human cloning programs, detailing the horrific treatment of the clones and the involvement of high-ranking officials and private contractors. The report also highlighted the systemic failures that allowed such activities to go unchecked, calling for sweeping reforms in oversight and transparency. As the commission's work progressed, several key figures were brought to justice. Indictments were handed down for those directly involved in the experiments, including scientists, military officers, and government officials. High-profile trials captured the nation's attention, shining a light on the dark underbelly of clandestine research and the moral cost of unchecked ambition. The revelations also prompted a broader societal reckoning. The ethical implications of cloning and genetic manipulation became subjects of intense public debate, leading to new regulations and oversight mechanisms. The scientific community, grappling with the fallout, began to establish stricter ethical guidelines for research, prioritizing human dignity and informed consent. Dr. Evelyn Carter, whose courageous whistleblowing had sparked the entire movement, became a symbol of the power of truth and the importance of ethical integrity. Her testimony before the commission and her continued advocacy for transparency and accountability inspired a new generation of scientists and activists dedicated to ensuring that such abuses would never happen again. In the end, the exposure of the cloning experiments at the Redstone facility was more than just the uncovering of a dark secret. It was a catalyst for change, a reminder of the need for vigilance in the face of unchecked power, and a testament to the resilience of those who dare to seek the truth. The government may have tried to hide the horrors of human cloning, but the courage of whistleblowers and the determination of the public ensured that the light of justice would prevail. Deep in the heart of the Appalachian Mountains, where the boundaries between modern civilization and untamed wilderness blur, a hidden facility lay dormant for decades. Tucked away beneath layers of red tape and misinformation, this secret compound was officially non-existent. On paper, it was listed as a simple weather station, but in reality, it was the birthplace of something far darker: an underground human cloning project funded by a cabal of powerful entities. The public had heard whispers of genetic experimentation for years, stories about sheep cloned in laboratories and stem cell research that was just a step away from playing God. But what they didn't know was that these were only breadcrumbs, distractions carefully placed to keep attention away from what was really happening. In the early 1970s, the U.S. government, under the guise of the Department of Energy, initiated a covert program known as Project Doppelganger. Unlike the high-profile scientific achievements of the time, Project Doppelganger's goal wasn't just about mapping the human genome or advancing medical treatments. It was about control the ability to replicate and replace individuals with exact genetic copies. The cloning of humans was not just a possibility but a reality, far more advanced than any outsider could have imagined. Key scientists were recruited from both Nazi and Soviet wartime experiments, quietly brought to the U.S. under programs like Operation Paperclip. While the public thought these figures had been rehabilitated into the scientific community, the truth was that they were working in the shadows, developing cloning techniques decades ahead of what the world believed was possible. What started as a small project soon grew into something monstrous. By the late 1980s, the facility hidden in Appalachia had made significant breakthroughs. The first human clone was not only born but matured in less than 3 years. The subjects known as doppelgangers were exact replicas, indistinguishable from their original counterparts. But there was something wrong. Each clone carried subtle, eerie differences. Their behavior, while similar on the surface, had a mechanical coldness, a lack of spontaneity that became difficult to ignore. They were physically identical but psychologically incomplete. The creators of these clones had not just copied human life, they had manufactured it. By the time the 1990s rolled around, Project Doppelganger had already replaced key individuals in government, business, and media with cloned counterparts. These doppelgangers operated in lockstep with the agenda of their handlers' shadow organizations with goals that went beyond simple governance. They were part of a deeper plan, a plan that aimed to ensure control over the population by shaping public opinion, rewriting policy, and erasing those who resisted. This was not just theoretical evidence of these activities began to leak out in the form of small anomalies, isolated but terrifying. People close to key politicians, high-ranking military officials, and even celebrities noticed changes in behavior that couldn't be explained. Sudden shifts in personality, knowledge gaps about their pasts, and moments where their actions seemed inexplicably out of character. These weren't conspiracy theories, but real incidents reported by those close to the power structure. In 1994, an investigative journalist by the name of James Harper caught wind of these stories. Harper had a reputation for diving into the darkest corners of government secrets, and his nose for controversy led him straight to Appalachia. After months of research and countless dead ends, he uncovered a lead, a man who had worked as a security guard at one of the facilities claimed to have seen copies of high-level government officials being transported to secret meetings in the middle of the night. These meetings, held deep within the facility, were about more than policy. They were about control, about replacing real leaders with clones who could be manipulated. Harper's investigation took him deep into the labyrinth of shadow politics, but just when he was about to publish his findings, he vanished. His notes, his contacts, his entire body of work disappeared with him. Official reports claimed he died in a car accident, but those who knew him best never believed it. His family received anonymous letters stating James had gotten too close to the facility, however, continued to hum along in secrecy, its work growing more ambitious by the year. By the early 2000s, cloning had become so refined that it wasn't just politicians being replaced. Scientists, corporate executives, and military leaders across the globe were part of this silent replication campaign, all working to advance the hidden agenda of those who had created them. The clones, while nearly perfect, had one flaw they were programmed to obey. However, there was one subject, Subject 33, who began to exhibit signs of free will, of breaking out of the mold set for him. Subject 33 was a replica of a high-ranking official within the U.S. intelligence community created for the purpose of furthering the doppelganger agenda. But something went wrong. He began to remember fragments of a life that was not his own. In one of the most bizarre incidents to come out of Project Doppelganger, Subject 33 escaped the Appalachian facility in 2003. What followed was an unprecedented manhunt, with every federal agency in the country searching for him under the radar. The escape was never reported to the public, but rumors spread through the intelligence community like wildfire. Subject 33 wasn't just running, he was hunting for answers. Armed with the knowledge of the cloning program and his own unnatural existence, he sought out the original person he had been cloned from. When he finally tracked down his original, the meeting did not go as anyone would have expected. Instead of confrontation, there was a shocking discovery. Subject 33 knew things his original didn't. Memories, secrets, details that had somehow been implanted in the clone but had not existed in the real person's life. These weren't just memories from the cloned official, they were memories from others, fragments of lives from multiple people, all mixed into a single mind. Somehow, Subject 33 had become more than just a replica. He had become a repository for knowledge, a walking database of information spanning decades and involving key figures across global politics. Before Subject 33 could reveal more, he was found dead under mysterious circumstances in a hotel room in Virginia. Official reports claimed it was a heart attack, but those in the know were convinced it was something else. His body was quickly cremated, and no autopsy report was ever made public. His death was a message to anyone who might be tempted to dig deeper into Project Doppelganger. By the time the mid-2000s arrived, the public was none the wiser. The cloning project had moved beyond the experimental phase. It was now fully operational. The doppelganger clones had infiltrated every level of power, from local government to international institutions. Their influence was felt in the passing of key laws, the collapse of industries, and the strategic rise of new global powers. Every shift in the political landscape, every sudden turn of events that seemed improbable, had been carefully orchestrated by clones working under the control of those who had created them. The original humans, the ones who had been cloned, were often quietly removed, either killed or forced into exile, their identities erased or rewritten. In some cases, the real individuals were allowed to continue living in isolation, unaware that they had been replaced in the public eye. But the true power now resided with the shadow operators who had perfected the art of human cloning and built a global network of replicas. For the clones, their existence was not one of autonomy. They were bound by programming, tethered to unseen masters who held the keys to their creation. Their lives were manufactured, their memories incomplete, but their influence was absolute. To this day, the public remains oblivious to the silent takeover that has occurred. The leaders they see on television, the figures they trust to guide their nations, the voices of authority they rely on, may not be the original people at all. They may be something else, copies, designed to serve the agenda of an unseen hand. The cloning project continues, refined with each passing year, as new technologies emerge to enhance the process. Somewhere, deep within the shadows, the architects of this grand deception watch as the world they've quietly controlled for decades continues to evolve, with no one the wiser. And those who suspect the truth, they disappear. Just like James Harper. The Doppelganger program, after all, leaves no loose ends.